We discuss Yu-Gi-Oh card name etymology frequently on this channel, whether it's for a single entry or a whole video topic. While in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, translating names is pretty consistent, usually just going for a direct translation, something in the spirit of the original, or just something goofy on a throwaway card, early Yu-Gi-Oh tended to either go with direct translations or renaming things entirely, creating some issues later on if those cards became an archetype. But one of the most interesting ways of translating old card names was by not translating them at all. Some old Yu-Gi-Oh cards had an English name that was just the Japanese name written out in English lettering, and those names tended to be iconic to us since the Japanese names just sounded cooler. So for this video, we're looking at the card names that stuck out to us just for retaining their Japanese name in the translation. Maybe there's even some cool trivia behind the name, or maybe we just like saying it. And joining me is the master of the Yu-Gi-Oh language, Sam from Dungeon Dive Bar.
You know, what it would have been smart is for me to have looked up the Japanese translation of Dungeon Dive Bar and made that my name for today, but forward thinking is not our strong suit on this show.
Now, let's sound out the top 10 untranslated Yu-Gi-Oh card names. Number 10, Muka Muka. This is one of those words that's a concept rather than something that can be translated into a single word. Muka Muka is a Japanese term that means something bubbling from within, usually being nausea like a stomach ache or intense burning rage. Looking at this crab geyser creature, I'm assuming it's the latter and he's exploding from rage, but that smoke coming from his volcano head could also be stinky and cause nausea, so maybe it's both.
He was a giant enemy crab rock. He was a rock lobster.
What makes Muka Muka particularly memorable is he was one of the first effect monsters in the game, and besides having that novelty with him, it was a good effect for the time. It gains 300 attack points per card in your hand. He has 600 attack points on default, and in the early game, there weren't that many spells or traps that you were setting, and you were just summoning one monster per turn. So with the pace of the early game, you could be saving a lot of cards in your hand, and if you draw Muka Muka early in a duel, that could be like 4 or 5 cards in your hand, meaning his attack goes up to 1800 or 2100.
This is when Skull Redbird was the meta, and you summon a 1550 attack monster and everyone's like, whoa, snap, that's 1550. That's a big number. And you go, oh yeah? I have Muka Muka. Oh, wow, that's 2100. This is how we learned math back in the 90s and 2000s. Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Towards the end of the original era, it got an upgraded form, Enraged Muka Muka, which was a level 5 monster with 1200 attack, and he gains 400 attack per card in your hand. He was not good since the meta evolved, and he was a tribute monster, but we at least got to see our boy again, and now he's very, very angry.
I love the art of Enraged Muka Muka. He looks like a frog that just cannot ribbit. His stomach's engorged, claws are bigger, he's got extra eyes, he just looks big.
His Japanese name is Gecko no Muka Muka, with Gecko no pretty much meaning enraged, so the translation could be interpreted as enraged internal rage, or something like that. Other direct translations tend to go for nausea as the first meaning of Muka Muka, so the name would be something like rage-induced nausea, and if that's the case, stay away from this guy's mouth when he's doing that. Number 9, Giroshin Kuwagata. For those who know early Yu-Gi-Oh, this monster was a menace. It was in the 4th booster set released in the TCG, Pharaoh's Servant, and it was a level 4 normal monster with 1700 attack. 1700 was still in the range for high attack for a standard normal summon at the time, and with the higher attack level 4 monsters being harder to come by, a low rarity card in an easy to obtain set was perfect for playground decks. Just get yourself some spells that boost attack, and this guy can get over 2000 attack with ease, and because he was a budget deck staple, everything else about him became iconic to me. He's a cool ass bug man with what sounds like a unique name, Giroshin Kuwagata. Who doesn't love saying that? I didn't know what I was saying, but I liked it. The translation is Guillotine Stag Beetle, with Kuwagata being Stag Beetle, and Giroshin being a transliteration of guillotine since certain syllables were not in the Japanese alphabet. Giroshin, Guillotine, Guillotine Stag Beetle is really cool cool on its own, so the translation would have been fine here. But considering tragedy and dramatic rescue were completely redrawn to censor depictions of the guillotine back in the day, I could see this non-translation just being a way to indirectly censor the word without actually having to censor it. That being said, they still made this card sound cool.
Yeah, and stag beetles in Japan, they're ubiquitous. Like, stag beetles, rhinoceros beetles, kabuto, kuwagata, these are like a very iconic thing in Japan. The very first Kamen Rider was based off of a kuwagata. He's a stag beetle. This has been a thing in Japan for decades. And then they come to America where it's like, I've never seen this before. What is this? So like, if we call this a stag beetle, no one's gonna know what that is. Let's call it kuwagata. It's got those sharp syllables. It sounds cool. It sounds like something that's dangerous. And you know, the artwork even references the flavor text. The flavor text rarely matches in Yu-Gi-Oh with the artwork. Despite its small size, this monster has powerful jaws that can rip metal to shreds. It's the size of a screw. You see the giant leaves and grass, and it tore a bolt in half. Whether is it going to eat the bolt? I don't know, but it can cut it. It makes me think of that early Pokemon episode when Ash is in Viridian Forest and he meets Bugcatcher, and he has the horror imagined spot of the samurai's pincer cutting his Metapod in half. That's what this reminds me of. And again, pincer's based off of a giant beetle.
I think my other realization where I connected Kuwagata with Stag Beetle was with Boomer Coanger in Mega Man X, because I was always like, what's a Coanger? That's a silly word. And then I realized, oh, he's a Stag Beetle with a boomerang mouth. They're combining the words. By extension, the monster Kuwagata Alpha is another Stag Beetle that went untranslated, since Alpha was in the Japanese name too, and its English name did something I don't think we ever see again by putting the Greek letter in the name rather than just writing it out like they do with the Magnet Warriors or the Psy-Frames. And if that's the case, he's even cooler than I already thought. He racked up points with me by appearing on the giant ballpark cards. Dude's a dirty pitcher. Can't wait to do an entry about his lore someday. Number 8. Ushioni. Ushioni translates to Ox Demon, but the lack of translating it makes sense since it's the name of a yokai or demon in folklore. Ushioni is a giant demon spider hybrid who emerges from watery areas to spit poison and such at its prey. It has a few different origins, but it mainly seems like it's just evil for the love of the game, and flesh. It eats flesh. My favorite variation of the legend in real life is if a body of water was dirty, people would say, Ushioni must be lurking in it. I never quite got why it's spider themed but it lives in the water, but hey, folklore doesn't need to have perfect logic, nor does a Yu-Gi-Oh card. I love how it barely has the spider theme on it. You can see some arachnid legs around its stomach, but they lean harder into the water theme by giving him octopus tentacles. Also, he has a ghost-like bottom half that's emerging from a jar. Not sure if that's a part of the legend too, but it sure makes him stand out. And if it is a part of the legend, let me know in the comments. Not to mention, he has a face on his elbow, so I don't know if they were just making up things or if there's a lot of designs out there that they took inspiration from, but I like the elbow face. In general, Ushioni has always been an interesting monster to me beyond the design and name, since he got random spotlights. In Japanese, he was just in the generic booster sets, but in the US, he was only available in the McDonald's Happy Meal promotion in 2002, making him rare, but not too rare since he was just a 2150 attack level 6 normal monster, so you weren't missing much. We already had Summon Skull at this point.
Ushioni, bad. He was a worse version of Summon Skull then, and he's a worse version of Summon Skull now. He's not even an Archfiend. He's a Bull Fiend restored by the Dark Arts that appears out of a jar. He can be Jar of Greed support. Imagine summoning this guy, you search any jar card, and your opponent just says, and now I add Morphing Jar to my hand. Morphing Jar is no longer counted as a jar card.
And then later on, for some reason, he got Ace Monster status in a deck in early Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, when Yusei had to duel the strongest prisoner Jin, or Bolt in the dub, and he transformed it into Giant Ushioni, which had the stronger spider theme to it, and it could attack twice in a turn if it destroys a monster. That's not a great effect, especially since it's a monster that you can only summon by tributing a different tribute summoned normal monster. But hey, that's jobber decks for ya. Random upgraded forms of monsters are not out of the ordinary for the anime, but why did they choose this random tribute monster from the early sets to put in the Synchro era? Maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! GX I'd expected, but I think someone on the staff just really liked the legend of Ushioni and found an opening here. Can't wait to see this card get printed someday, and they add on some crazy effect that supports fiend monsters in general or something like that, since they always give some crazy effect to these random old throwaway monsters from the anime that they took 20 years to print. Final note, there's the monster another Abare Ushioni, which is a seemingly different demonic-looking cattle that has a coin flip burn effect and an untranslated name too. Abare means raging, so it's Raging Cattle Demon. I don't know, I've always kinda liked this card. Maybe it's because he's barreling through Kickman, which you say used in the duel after facing the Ushioni user, and this card came out 3 years before that episode. There's some kind of correlation here that I want to point out, but I don't really think it means anything. Number 7, Raimei. I love that Raimei is a terrible burn card, but no one ever brings it up because there's an even weaker burn card out there, Sparks, and Raimei was only released in the first ever tournament pack, so it was never easily obtainable, nor did anyone need it, or seek it out, or even know about it because of that. Its effect is, decrease your opponent's life points by 300 points. It never got updated card text since they never reprinted it. Shouldn't it be something like, inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent, or something like that now? Since Sparks only deals 200 burn damage, it got all the memes for being the weakest, and burn cards like Tremendous Fire and Uzaki deal more formidable damage, so they were better options in legitimate burn strategies. But what makes Raimei's name stick out is, of these early burn spells, this was the only one with the same name in Japanese and English. Other burn spells were either English translations, or they just put a different Japanese word as the name. For example, Hinotama was literally the English word fireball written in Japanese katakana in Japanese, so the English name was the Japanese word Hinotama, which translates to fireball. Sparks was just a translation of the Japanese word Hinoko, Tremendous Fire was Ka-enji Goku in Japanese, which is blazing hell, can't have hell on a card yet, and Ukazi was Chuya no Okaji in Japanese, meaning large fire of day and night, so that one I think they were trying to go with the Japanese name, but they kinda messed up the spelling. But without an issue, Raimei was Raimei across the board, translating to Thunderclap, which also connected it to the Raigeki storyline, once again making it the only card with the same name in Japanese and English of that series of cards. Again, it's the English word Thunderbolt on every mention of it on a Japanese card, and Raigeki on every mention of it on an English card.
I find it interesting that this is a Thunder Lightning themed card, when all the other Thunder and Lightning themed cards have always been associated with monster destruction. Raigeki, Lightning Vortex, Lightning Storm, Lightning Skywolf is another one. Even Makyu the Magical Mist combined with Summon Skull's Lightning Strike. It's a Lightning Storm electrifying mist. So to have a Thunder Lightning related card that's just chip burn damage is weird. Thunder, Thunder, Thunder. Decrease your opponent's life points by 300.
Final note, in some sort of inverse scenario, the monster Raimei with a hyphen is written in English letters in the Japanese name, and then of course the same for the English name, and the same for its counterpart Raijin, so Raimei is truly carrying on the Raimei legacy. Number 6, Mishazure. Mishazure is a Japanese word that in short translates to traveling companion or fellow traveler, but with a bit more words, it means someone brought along somewhere forcibly or at least involuntarily, so you're more saying it as sarcastic, like, fellow traveler, you're coming with me, and then your friend drags you on an adventure that may or may not lead you to peril. In this case, though, it's the more ominous meaning of the term, being a supernatural force taking you into the afterlife, or somewhere similar, since its effect is, when one of your monsters leaves the field, this trap lets you destroy one of your opponent's monsters in return. So your monster gets destroyed, and then you get to force a fellow traveler to go with it. And this is depicted on the art, where the bald guy is bringing the other guy down with him as they're trying to get out of some sort of trap hole that may or may not be bottomless. And the guy on top kinda looks like Tenchi's grandfather from Tenchi Muyo, at least with the hair. These guys were also on the card Appropriate, so maybe the greed finally got the best of them, where they ended up in a pitfall, and the bald guy is like, oh no, we got into this together, we're going down together. And then they get dragged down into the grave together, and if you're wondering about the spell dragged down into the grave, its Japanese name is Hakana no Mishazure, so Mishazure could have just been called dragged down in English.
I think it should have been related to drag down into the grave rather than appropriate, guys. Like, I get it that their greed is killing them and they're dragging each other down, but it should have been either the drag down to the grave or even the share the pain guys. Like, two people who literally are sharing the pain and going to hell together. That would have been so much cooler.
That being said, I like the untranslated name they picked, and it was a fun early removal card from the Pharaoh's Servant days. Number 5. 5. Umi, Sogen, and Yami. Some of the most basic and nostalgic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are the original Type Booster field spells. These gave basic boosts or debuffs of 200 attack and defense to a handful of monster types based on the environment in the art, like Mountain helping out flying monsters such as winged beasts and dragons, or Forest helping out insects and plants.
When I was an early Duel Links player, I had a really basic dragon beatdown deck that just had the skill of place the dragon boosting field spell in your field zone. And then slowly I replaced all the dragons and went, why do I still have this field skill?
There were 6 in total in the first TCG set and early Japanese sets, and to go with their basic effects, they had the simplest names in Japanese. Mori being forest, Yama being mountain, Sogen being grassland, Umi being sea, Koya being wasteland, and Yami being darkness. So when they were translated into English, for whatever reason, they only directly translated the names of 3 of them and then kept the other half with their Japanese names. Mountain, wasteland, and forest were all in English, but Umi, Sogen, and Yami were in Japanese. They were all 2-syllable words in either language, so I don't know their logic behind it. For Yami, that name was a bit more confusing for me as a kid, since I didn't really understand it was Japanese, and the anime dub called the pharaoh Yami, along with the other Millennium Item personas having Yami in their name, so I was like, is this based on them? Is this a Planet Vegeta situation? Does the pharaoh hear about this card and just say, Yami, my enemy, the field, or me?
I remembered running Yami in my Yugi starter deck because it gave the Dark Magician 2700 attack. And then by combining it with the Book of Secret Arts, I could match Blue Eyes in attack points.
As for Umi, it's just become a pretty iconic card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Overall, since for whatever reason, they decided to make a whole bunch of water monsters focused on utilizing it for their effects, with the original boss being Levia Dragon Daedalus. Send Umi from the field to the graveyard, destroy everything else on the field. That monster made early water decks so cool, and now we have a whole bunch of field spells and other card effects that count as Umi to utilize these newer Umi effects, making it easily the most famous of this group of 6. So, regardless of why Umi's name was untranslated, if you ever get beat by a water pile deck nowadays, get ready to hear this card's name becomes Umi in your nightmares. Number 4. Hane-Hane, or Hane-Hane as we called him as kids. This monster's design was always a bit confusing to me, but it's actually explained with its name. Hane is a Japanese word that can mean a couple of different things depending on the context. In this case, it can mean blade or it can mean feather. It gets to be some fun wordplay with Hane being said twice, but a different thing is meant each time. You can have it translate to blade feather or feather blade, whichever you prefer. And if you look at Hane-Hane's art, his weapon is bladed, being a scythe, and he has a nice pattern of feathers. He's got 3 points of feathers around his collar, and the collar is made of feathers too, and they're also flying around him. So there you go, a blade and feathers as the name advertises. I never got what he was supposed to be though. Like the face looks human, but it appears he has teeth below his cheeks and his hands are just floating Rayman style. He's also labeled as a beast, so I'm not sure if he's referencing anything, or if they just wanted to create a guy with feathers and a blade and they made up the rest as they went along. This is another early effect monster like Muka Muka, only it was a part of the early meta with that effect. It's a flip monster, where, when flipped, it targets a monster on the field and returns it to the hand. That's an early form of removal, which could be devastating when tribute monsters were high investment back in the day, so now your opponent has to get even more monsters on the field to get that tribute monster back out.
I remember playing Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! And every time my opponent set a monster, because this is, again, Playground rules, setting was not something we did. It was summon to face-up attack or face-up defense, like the anime. And every time I was like, is that Man-Eater Bug or is that Hane-Hane? And then, I would attack it, because what else am I going to do? Let him have a monster to tribute? That could be summon skull summoning material. And then it turned out to be Cyberjar. It was always Cyberjar, because ban lists, no. Run 3 Cyberjars.
Hane-Hane also got an upgraded form, Hade-Hane, with the Hade meaning flashy or gaudy, so that means that these are flashy blades or flashy feathers, whichever makes more sense to you. These guys still have the floating hands and blades, and more importantly, a bouncing effect, where, when flipped, they let you target up to 3 monsters on the field and send them back to the hand, which is great value, until you see that they made them a level 5, which would mean that you would have to tribute to set them. Not very good, but it's a reference to the past, and we love references to the past, just not as much when you make them tribute monsters. Number 3, Karibo. This is probably the most well-known own card with an untranslated name. You hear Karibo, and you're like, oh, the fuzzy guy, that's just his name, right? A Karibo is a Karibo, which is a Karibo, and anytime I see the translation, it treats it that way. But to break down the name is closest to translating to chestnut person, with curry meaning chestnut, and bo being a suffix that means little guy, so there's no complex meaning behind the name. It just seems that he looked like a chestnut, and that's how Kazuki Takahashi decided to name him.
If they tried to translate it or do something else with his name, it would have worked. He's Karibo.
Also, if your chestnuts are fuzzy, don't use them for eating purposes. It's also possible that Karibo looks like a Goomba from Mario, and that's how it got the name, since their Japanese name is also Karibo. And the story behind the Mario one is, the Mario devs saw these enemies back in the day and thought they looked more like chestnuts rather than mushrooms, so they called them chestnut people, aka Karibo. In fact, when I first looked up the translation for the Yu-Gi-Oh card name, it came up as Goomba being the official meaning, but that's a Mario lore tangent. Karibo is the Yu-Gi-Oh monster known for being the first hand trap, being able to block a single hit of battle damage by being discarded, and then it spun off a whole series of monsters that either were hand traps or stopped damage in some way, or both, or neither. For those interested, I have a video on many of the Karibo explaining them. The naming pattern continues where many of the Japanese names change a syllable to still sound like Karibo, like Curryborn, Junk Karibo, Curryvolt, Currybon. Wait, what's the wordplay there? Let's just put that one into the handy dandy translator again, and it's Goomba again somehow! Okay, I tried it another day, and it came out to Cribbin instead, like the ribbon on its tail. I get it, that's pretty cute. Anyway, that's Karibo, a demon puffball whose name means chestnut, Mario enemy, and itself all in one. Number 2, Farin Kazan. This is one of those names that sounds so cool in Japanese, even though it's just 4 rather generic words. It translates to Wind, Forest, Fire, Mountain. It doesn't sound right calling the card that in English. You need the Japanese name here. It's like how JoJo's fans need to hear Dio say Muda 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 instead of useless, useless, useless. Or Dragon Ball fans need to hear Beerus say Hakai instead of just destruction. There's a ring to saying, I activate Farin Kazan to destroy the field. Plus, the 4 syllables are a classic phrase in Japanese that transcends translation. Famous samurai and daimyo, which is 1 level below shogun, Takeda Shingen, used Furin Kazan as his battle standard, which itself was based on a quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Move as swift as the wind, stay as silent as a forest, attack fierce as fire, unmovable defense like a mountain. So he took the part of nature that you had to be like for each synonym to shorten it to wind, forest, fire, mountain. And as with its history, it's made its way into Japanese vernacular and pop culture. I'd say its most famous use in pop culture was having the 4 syllables on Ryu's belt and original stage in Street Fighter II, and the next most notable use for me was on this Yugioh card. To go with the 4 mentions of nature in the name, its effect needs you to have monsters face up on the field that are the 4 elemental attributes, wind, earth, fire, and water. Wind and fire are directly mentioned in the translation, earth can be forest, and I guess that makes water mountain, even though mountain in Yu-Gi-Oh tends to be associated with wind as well. But double wind would be awkward, so pretend these mountains are wet. When fulfilled, you get to pick one of 4 effects, with the theme that the 4 effects are based on cards that were so broken, they hit the ban list in some form in 2004 when this card came out, so they make you now work for these effects, but put them all on one convenient card. You can destroy all your opponent's monsters, being Raigeki, destroy all their spells and traps, being Harpy's Feather Duster, discard 2 random cards from their hand, being Delinquent Duo, or draw 2 cards, being Pot of Greed. And looking at the modern game, it's funny how 2 of these cards are still banned, one is limited, but Raigeki is just fully unlimited now, and only really used as a side deck tech or in specific going second decks. It's like players reacted, oh, just a board wipe on a normal spell? Useless! Every monster has floating effects or destruction prevention now. Also, that's hyperbole. Raigeki is still good.
Yeah, no, so I love this, and just here are cards that are banned. but a trap with incredibly difficult conditions to pull off. And then Konami went, we can just release these now. There's no meaning to them anymore. This game is meaningless.
Hey, you know, Pot of Greed is still banned.
Which we could honestly get back at this point, because as we learned horribly in the no ban list formats, Pot of Greed is too slow now, which is insane to hear say out loud.
Furin Kanzan itself was never used, but theoretically, it could be a fun tech card in archetypes that use the 4 elements, or as I discussed on my weird ritual monsters that actually make sense list, it's a funny card to use with Elemental Mistress Doriado, since she counts as the 4 elemental attributes and that's her only effect. Just find a way to turbo her out, and you immediately have the conditions fulfilled to activate this card, since it doesn't specify that you need 1 monster per attribute like it does on other elemental themed cards like Elemental Burst. Also, you have no follow-up if you do this. You just destroy a bunch of stuff with the trap and Doriado's help, and now you only have a 1200 attack monster. Final note, in the 2007 Yu-Gi-Oh video game, one of your opponents is Furin Kazan, which is just the guy on the card, and I've always found it funny that his name is implied to be Furin Kazan here, instead of Takeda Shingen, who the character on the card was clearly based on. It feels like the gag of calling a video game protagonist by the name of the game title instead of their actual name. Like, look, it's Killzone from Killzone, or Street Fighter from Street Fighter, or Bloodborne from Bloodborne. I could go on all day with this gag. Metroid from Metroid, Yu-Gi-Oh from Yu-Gi-Oh. Actually, that one completely makes sense in translation. For number 1, we went with the silliest guys whose untranslated names already had the silly vibe without putting them into the translator. They always seem to make their way back into my videos. Number 1, Aitsu, Koitsu, Soitsu, and Doitsu. We've discussed them on my Cards Based on Konami video games list, and their potential retrain options on our Monsters We Want Retrained list, and again on our Monsters with Unfitting Types list. What makes these guys so interesting is they're terrible but incredibly goofy. They're multicolored human-shaped fairies that ride on paper airplanes with vaguely visible butts doing different funny poses. How do you not love these guys? They feel like the precursors to the Ojamas. They're so specifically odd since they're from the Parodius games, or Parodius games, don't know how you pronounce that, which are shoot-em-ups like the Gradius games, but everything is silly in them, including the ships. I don't know Konami's logic in making these guys specifically, but I'm glad they're here. And once again, Gradius, don't know how you pronounce that. The original duo in Yu-Gi-Oh was Aitsu and Koitsu, and they were incredibly gimmicky. This was when Union monsters were introduced into the game, which are monsters that could attach themselves to other monsters on the field to give them specific effects or boosts. As with many kinds of monsters introduced into the early game, they were slow and bad, but these guys felt exceptionally worse than the other Union monsters from the original batch. Aitsu was the normal monster of the duo with only 100 attack, and the Union was Koitsu, who could equip to Aitsu to make his attack 3000 and give him piercing. Also, Aitsu is a level 5 and Koitsu was a level 10, so you would have to either tribute a total of 3 monsters between them to get them both on the field, or use something like the attribute or type recruiters to get them on the field without tributing, and hope these low attack vulnerable guys are not dead by the time it gets to your turn. I feel like it was so much trouble to get them out because they were joke monsters, or maybe Konami was really afraid of overpowering the Union monsters out of the gate.
Way back in the day, when I was a wee lad, I used this card against a friend in a duel, and then we entered an eternal stalemate because that friend summoned Suijin in attack mode, and if I attacked, my attack would go to 0. And then, because we were playing Playground Yu-Gi-Oh, I still ran Reverse Trap, which is a very old card, which its effect is, if a monster's attack would be increased or decreased, reverse it. So they went, your attack's 0, and I went, my attack's now 6,000, and I won. It was the last time I ever played Yu-Gi-Oh with that friend, because I moved away, not because they got mad at me.
Hold on, I tried doing the B-roll for Sam's scenario in Duel Links, and apparently, that's not the right ruling. Reverse Trap would first reverse Koitsu's 3000 attack buff to be a 3000 attack subtraction, and even without that, you can't activate Reverse Trap in the damage step, so that means Sam would always have to activate Reverse Trap before his friend decided to use Suijin's attack lowering effect, meaning he would never never be caught off guard. So whoops, you told your friend the wrong rulings to get your wins. But don't worry, I'll never tell your friend. During the GX era, they tried this again with 2 more colors, Soitsu and Doitsu, but they made them low level so they could be summoned without tribute, and they had weakened effects where Doitsu only raises Soitsu's attack to 2500 when he is equipped, and he gets no piercing damage from him. Now that we've introduced you to the jank of these guys, let's look at the fun of their names. These are 4 Japanese slang terms to informally refer to people as. The initial 2 translated are this guy and that guy, being Koitsu and Aitsu respectively, and the latter 2 are which guy and that guy, being Doitsu and Soitsu respectively. Since Soitsu and Aitsu both mean that guy, more specifically, Soitsu means that guy but close by, and Aitsu means that guy but further away, or that other guy, which makes it a funny who's on first scenario when you put all their translated names together. As mentioned, these are slang terms, so you can't really break down the syllables to definitively say Su is always going to mean guy on all of them, and the first syllable is always going to be this or that or whatever. It's based on the context and construct of the sentence that they're used in, or if they're just said raw like in the names. This type of language is more meant to refer to objects, but it's also used for people, so only use it if you really know someone, or if you're being rude by referring to somebody as an object or just a second thought. As such, it's a very funny naming pattern for these faceless human-shaped creatures that are just a bunch of goofy guys. So for having names that we never second-guessed because they had so much else going on, Aitsu, Koitsu, Soitsu, and Doitsu take another spot on my lists, and it happens to be the top. Now, what did you think? Did you learn anything about these names that you never questioned, or did some things get lost in translation when we tried to explain them? And what are some of your favorite untranslated Yu-Gi-Oh card names, whether we discussed them or not? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.